Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Ready?
Born ready.
Hello. Oscar.
Can we do one more clap? Nice.
Or as my, I guess, followers, readers, viewers know you as O. It actually just came up the other day. I found it interesting because, like, Mark, our dear friend Mark, always says, "Oh, how's O?" And I was on an interview and someone's like, "Oh, your husband O," and I realized, oh, that's because they read what I post, and I always refer to you as O when I write about you in my blogs.
Well, you have a lot of thoughts going through your head, so the shorter you can make it, the reference, the better.
I guess so. And it's like, it's not a big secret that Oscar is my husband, but for some reason, I guess I just feel like, I don't know, on social media, just to refer to you as O is a little bit of anonymity, or a little bit of like maybe just a nickname, but it's funny because I don't ever call him O, just to clarify that, because I think people are confused.
No, but you do probably 10 times a day when I say something, you go, "Oh, God."
Oh. All right. Well, it is another MiOsc episode, everybody. Yay! So those of you joining us on YouTube can see the ridiculousness of whatever gesturing's happening here, but also some stretching, because as our viewers also know, we are trying to be 40 fit fu, which means in our 40s, staying fit for Kung Fu and martial arts and movement, and just staying alive, basically. But essentially, those of you listening, thanks for tuning in. And all right, Oscar, take it away, or O, as so many of you know him as by now.
You had some thoughts on what we wanted to talk about, so I can't wait to hear them.
As usual, listeners, we are basically we're so prepared for this episode. One can say we're over prepared.
Well, it's, if you think of a circle, and this is prepared, we're moving towards unprepared.
No, so you mean unprepared, preparing so much
We're
that
back
we've come
to
back to unprepared. So
That's
if
what I
we're
meant.
drawing a circle of like an O, then
Like an O. If I was more prepared, we would have had a better. But actually, it kind of all works out because it's an O.
it is an O, actually. So, yeah, all right. Well, one of the things that we have been doing over the last several months at the Kung Fu School, and I think that people often find our Wah Lum world very interesting because it is very unique. I think most of your family members are not involved in a traditional Chinese Kung Fu school, martial arts school, and that just pretty much 24/7 is submerged in that culture, right? Like,
Well, let me think. I've got a big family. Let me just go through and see if any of them.
Your mom's like one of 11. Your dad's
Yeah.
like one of 3.
Yeah.
But lots
Four.
of cousins. 4.
Yeah. So, no, I can't think of anyone.
Okay.
Who's involved in a
Yeah,
traditional Chinese martial arts.
So, I think many people then would say that it is an unusual lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree.
And I think there's a lot of curiosity around that. And being that I just had the pleasure of being on the Monica May radio show here in Orlando, she hit me up with so many different questions, from my advocacy to Mulan to Kung Fu. She asked about what is a sifu, because my podcast named The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. I thought it was so fascinating because it really made me feel a little bit like lifestyle ADD. Like, there's just so many different things, and not like I'm this worldly person that just does so much, but I feel like there's definitively, in many of the areas that we operate in, are atypical to the normal lifestyle. And I think a lot of people also don't necessarily understand what that means. And one of the things that also resonated as I was reflecting through conversation with her was, yeah, we've been here since 1980. What does that mean? That means educating the community on this Kung Fu temple in the middle of Orlando on Goldenrod Road which literally at the time was in the woods. You didn't get here till 94, 5, 95?
I moved down 94.
94. So, I mean, do you remember what that street looked like?
No, because I was always the type of person who wasn't a wanderer. So if I lived on a certain road, and then I had, when I got here, it was mainly going to school, then that was kind of it. Staying in that neighborhood, going to school, coming back.
So very much like your Brooklyn days. Would you say that's because of your Brooklyn days that
No,
habit carried over?
I think it's just the way that I am. Because my brothers went all over Orlando, I think. So
Did they do that in Brooklyn too, though?
more so than I did.
Right. So I guess what I mean is, it is who you are, but you form that habit also, like from your Brooklyn days, maybe from those experiences that builds that habit. Like, I don't know, is it a product of environment or nature, I guess?
I think the person that you are is a product of your genetics, your environment, the nurture that you get, all of it. And so who I am is an accumulation of all the experiences that I've been surrounded since I was born, and even the genetics of my parents. A lot of it probably with whatever my mom was going through while I was like in her womb. Like, so that's really what I guess I feel. But so the person that I am that's why, I have 3 brothers, right? There's 4 of us, and we're all so different because at that point of our lives and everything that we're being bombarded with is what forms us, right? We aren't all 4 the same, even though maybe when we moved down here, we all spoke the same, right? Because that's just the language. But
Yeah. So
Anyway.
you weren't familiar with Goldenrod Road until a little bit later, I would say. But even in the 90s, like, it was very different than it is now. Even in the 2000s.
all of Orlando was. So
Yeah.
I don't have to think of that specific road, but I guess a shorter answer would have been like all of Orlando was. Every street that I was in is totally different now. Now it's bigger, more expansive. There's more homes, more businesses. There's more people, more traffic.
Yeah.
So that's what 30 years does.
Yeah, and I think in reference to what we do with the traditional Chinese martial arts and having this Kung Fu temple, it's not even just, oh, we have a gym Kung Fu school place that's in a plaza, in a mall, or in a center, right? That's just a storefront. Like, it literally is this compound that people confuse for Buddhist temples, Chinese restaurants, all sorts of different, thoughts because of, I think the architecture of it is quite different. It's got the big yellow wall. There's so much about it that can be confusing, but also, I guess, a presumption is made when you pass by. Like, I don't know. I'm actually curious. So listeners, viewers, people in Central Florida, everybody who's driven by has a thought, right? I'm so curious as to, like, what that thought is as you drive by. Like, what is that? Or, oh, that must be this. Or, oh, that's really cool artwork on the wall of Wah Lum. So I'm really curious as to what people think, because I don't know, right? I've just grown up there. So it was my playground. It was my Kung Fu school. It was my after school care area. It was my place of, I think I spent more hours at the Kung Fu school in my lifetime, possibly, than in my home. So it's just kind of a place I'm very used to. And I realize as Central Florida has changed, as people start to learn more, there's still so much they don't understand about what a traditional Chinese martial arts school encompasses and embodies, and what it means to be a part of it. And I think this is where you and I were having conversations off air, how so many of our students don't necessarily even understand that it is such a big difference between I'm signing up for a XYZ fitness program or the gym or a sports club. And there's nothing wrong with any of all of those things. All of those things are fantastic, but I think the inherent understanding of the culture, the tradition, the etiquette, the expectations behind what this Wah Lum temple is, right? When people come in and even want to be a part of it, we're always very excited. But I think there's just still more education to be done. Like, even though we don't have people coming in and ordering egg rolls anymore, yay, Central Florida, for being able to read for the most part. Even though we have no access to books because there's so many books banned. Okay, had to say that really quick. I think that we were talking about, wow, what can we do to better clarify to students, potential students, people who are just driving by, like, what does this mean? Like, what is the Wah Lum Temple? What are their principles? Like, how does one become a member? And what are the expectations? And, I think you can probably give good insight, one, because you weren't born into this. You have been around for over 20 years, so you're pretty entrenched into it. But at the same time, I think you're able to kind of flip back and forth to, this wasn't how I was raised. However, I understand, this is how tradition is upheld here at the school.
Yeah.
Wow, that was long.
I think it all inevitably comes down to, here in the US, we are always have this sense of exceptionalism that is, the exceptional is done by the great person. It used to be the great man, I guess, but let's just say the great person, right?
Wow,
It could be
so progressive of you.
I'm so progressive, yeah. And so because of that, everyone looks at things through that lens of like, they are the great person who is about to embark on this journey, right? And I don't have the specific maybe correlation to make, but I know that in the past, Eastern philosophies or Eastern countries, China and Japan and things like that, have a more sense of a collective of being part of something. And that informs, it goes back to what I said earlier, of like, all these things inform who you are and how you think and how you approach stuff. So you take a person who's coming into traditional Kung Fu school, and their thought is, well, here's my journey that I'm about to embark, all true. And then they have to be taught by us, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, that yes, that's true, you're about to embark on this journey, but you are going to now become a part of something greater than yourself. And so because of that, then you have to then be pliable to certain rules and regulations, could be one thing, or certain forms of etiquette, or certain forms of learning. And if in the Wah Lum campus, right, if we look at it, there's the main thing is the Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple, there's Control Your Health Wah Lum Fit, there's the Wah Lum Cultural Center. But if you look at just the two, Wah Lum Temple and Control Your Health, most people who come and train and Control Your Health with me, I still foster this, yes, you are special, you are your own individual person, we're going to cater everything specifically to you. And the communication for someone who is coming into the Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple, into a classroom environment, not individually being taught as a private, is, yes, we are going to now, with all the decades of teaching and modern influences, we're going to be able to answer questions for you and make adjustments to the classes based on your limitations and your and capabilities, but then also teach them you are also now part of the Wah Lum family. And so that means adhering to certain principles, philosophies, rules, all these things. And so I think a challenge that we've had recently with students, new and old students, and I'm not talking and new and students who've been with us for a long time, is this thought of this fight that they're continuously having of, but I'm really special though. Right? Like,
this goes back to our reminder, everyone. No one is special.
Well, it's here.
Because we're all special. Right?
Well, it's something that I've been trying to see if I could better articulate, because for a long time, I've always loved the scene from Fight Club,
yes,
where Brad Pitt gives a speech on "You are not your own individual snowflake."
Yes.
It kind of resonated with me, right?
It resonated with me too. Even though
there's probably some fascist
contextually, like, not just fascist, but that was definitively like quite a movie.
yeah. But I could still go back and really enjoy that movie and really like a lot of parts of it, and
yes,
also look and go, okay, there's maybe some things we can question. But all that to say is, I've always liked that term, and whenever I taught classes, kids classes, I would always kind of say, you are not special. You are not your own individual snowflake. And over the years, what I've learned is and you know this for a fact because one, you've been teaching at Wah Lum forever, but also your experiences with the Sifu Mimi Chan show prove that every single person that you take the time to speak to and ask questions and find out a little bit about them, that person is very unique. They're special. They are funny and engaging and smart and like kind and all of these things, right? All the kids, whenever I talk to them, I'm like, wow, this was fascinating. I had a conversation with like this 6-year-old and it was amazing. Then you go and speak to, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Tai Chi students almost 90 years old and you speak to them and they're completely fascinating. So there's this thought that I don't know if I've articulated well, but it's that because every single person is so unique, and now you're putting yourself in an environment of a classroom, because we consider that we're teaching traditional Chinese martial arts. Like sometimes we have 35 students in a class. Yes, every single one of you is special, but because of that, and because we're all kind of going towards the same thing, none of you are special. So we can't then break different rules because of that. But a lot of students, when we maybe enforce is the wrong word, but when we remind them of, hey, these are, our rules, our regulations, our philosophies, when we question them on that, they take it as like this affront of like, no, but you don't understand my full story because I'm actually really special and I'm a really good person and I don't mean anything bad by what I was doing. And so we've had instances, for example, we have a policy at the temple where everyone's wearing the same uniform. Mm-hmm. And some people have passes based on medical clearance, right? Like that, we actually have a student who has one piece of his body grafted to his foot. And so he can't wear our Kung Fu shoes. Mm-hmm. But then there's other people who just say, well, you know what? I don't like these Kung Fu shoes, so I'm going to go ahead and bring my own shoes, thinking that they are special enough to just do that. And our thought is, well, one, there's rules, right? Like you're part of a group. And then two, like you have a conversation about this.
Right. I think this is where, okay, so let me put a pin in that. A couple of things. One is that exceptionalism that you just mentioned. This really circles back to the idea of, and we're being specific, right? Like this is American exceptionalism. We are in America. We love America. We're not criticizing as a whole.
America is exceptional.
I think it is exceptional, right? But then us as an individual, because of that, should then be entitled to better, different, privileged, whatever word you want to use, treatment. And I think it's important that, like you said, when you do go to be a part of something as a collective and you're joining a team or a family or a culture, or at the Kung Fu school we're very familial, like all the names are familial, right? That you do then respect the culture, the policies, the rules, however you want to say it, of that collective. Like if you were a soccer player on a team, I remember it was a million years ago, everybody, but of course, back in grade school, everybody wanted to be on the soccer team. That was the thing. Like you couldn't just show up in your shorts that you wanted to wear, or you didn't play as part of the team. You had to wear the cleats. You had to wear specific socks, even everything. Plus I grew up in private school, right? And that was very strict. So I was always kind of conditioned to this way of like, well, in these areas of your life, this is what is required and what we follow. And it was very much simple. If you didn't want to do that, then you weren't a part of that. Right. It was pretty simple, right? And it wasn't this, well, but I am different. I can be different because, or why would you question me because? So I think there's that exceptionalism that we kind of take to the extreme because we're not calling anyone a bad person if they're not abiding by the principles of the school, or they don't want to bow because it is against their religion or it's against their culture or whatever. I was like, bowing is a respect gesture in our culture. And if you don't want to show that respect, then this isn't the place for you. And that's completely your choice. This is also a total tangent, but where you and I get frustrated with people, with comedians, where they're like, no, they should never, ever, ever say XYZ or this. And it's like, well, then don't listen to that comedian. If you have that choice, you have the option of not listening, tuning in, joining, being a part of. But if you want to be a part of something that has a specification on it, then I think at the beginning of it, you just accept that, right? Versus thinking you're such an exception. The second part of that, of course, is where, you're talking about people who have a story to share, which is literally everyone. Like you said, everybody wants, I'm so grateful now because I get so many people who actually want to be on my podcast versus me like chasing people down and begging. Like I actually have award-winning writers and people who are like, hey, can I be on your podcast? And then I don't want to call people everyday humans, but maybe humans who aren't published or people who are hobbyists or something like that. And they just, I want to be on your podcast. And it's been really hard because I've had to kind of be a little picky and choosy, but you're always going to be a guest on my podcast because you're the podcast co-host and my favorite guest of all time. But it's been such a privilege. But literally, like you said, everyone has a story to share. Everybody has something very interesting in their life to share, whether it's how they grew up or how they're, what they cook on a daily basis. Like it's been so incredible to be able to learn. But you're so right in that all these voices, everyone has, something that has been interesting or thought-provoking. And I've learned so much from this podcast because of that. And so, yes, love the snowflake scene, Fight Club. I don't know. It's also a book, of course, first.
There's a line in which I just can't repeat here. There's a line in the book and the movie. And it's almost a challenge of which one is worse. Like which one is more aggressive of a line, and I love both of those lines. And I'm not going to say them, but if you know what they are, you can look them up. But
if you know, you know.
Yeah, if you know, you know. But in the past, I would always just start off with, "You're not special. Just get over yourself," right? Which is a little bit harsh, right? But
I think it's harsh only because the modern day human is a little deconditioned.
Yes,
and I'm going to say it, more sensitive.
Yes, I those things are both true, but also because I didn't give them the context of what I had said earlier of like, it's because everyone's special. That's why you're not special. Like you are an amazing person, but you're not special. Everyone's an amazing person. And I used to just say the latter part, and I think
and also that no one cares about you,
which is also true. This I really believe this. Deep down, people care mostly about themselves.
Yes.
And every act that they're doing is a way to kind of, make themselves feel better or whatnot. And hopefully, whatever that you're doing also helps other people. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that most people don't care about you. They don't because...
and we didn't steal this per se, but it really resonated when we saw a stand-up comic, was it Chris Rock? And he's like, yeah, tell your kids, nobody cares about you. Probably even in this house sometimes, let alone when you go out there. So if you're just preparing your child for, you're so special, everyone cares about you, all of your wants and needs are our number one priority, you're not preparing your child for stepping outside this door. Right. And I totally did it injustice, but it's a good bit because there's so much truth to, I hate to say this because it makes me sound like an old person that's being all lectury or something, but yeah, we just don't prepare our kids, I think, enough for the emotional turmoil and the emotional stakes that are outside their, little safe space. And I guess just growing up in a very traditional Chinese and then a very Chinese Jamaican household, there was not a lot of censorship and holding back from criticism. Growing up in a Chinese martial arts school, it makes you less sensitive, but I don't think it makes you insensitive.
It makes you actually less of the person who's going to be crushed by a certain comment, but also understanding of the power that words have, right? Like we understand that when you tell a young kid, like let's say, if I were to reflect back on myself, 12-year Oscar, wow, you're really skinny, you need to put on muscle. Like how that can either make them feel very bad about themselves or say, man, you know what? It's true. I got to go do some push-ups or something, like both of those things can happen. So that there is a lot of power there. But when you're around someone like your father who is says things very factually. Like my nickname is Big Head.
大頭仔.
Like I have a bigger head. Like if I hadn't heard that for 25 years, right? And the first time I heard it was now at 45, I would be a little sensitive, right? Like he would call someone who's overweight like fat boy. Like obviously we don't want to make people feel really bad, but that's just him actually being factual. If someone had red hair, he'd be like red hair person, right? That's just how he is. So when you're surrounded by that, one, you build a thicker skin, but I think that even the bigger picture is that we are, I heard someone say this, so I want to get it right. We are more charitable with what his intentions are. Because we understand that he's a good person. And most of the time it comes to this thing of trust. Like I trust this person, so when they say something, I'm not immediately going to be reactive. I'm going to say, well, where are they coming from? And a challenge that we have with students, and I think this is more for actually people who are our generation, right? Is because it's very easy to say these young people are sensitive. They don't realize, we don't realize at the heat of the moment how sensitive we are when we get called into question about our integrity or something like that. So I think these things happen sometimes, to bring it all back to our students. This happens sometimes to our students when we say something as simple as, hey, you need to be wearing the uniform, the shoes that we said that you agreed upon. And some students will be like, oh, that's right. You know what? We actually have some students who've showed up like, I didn't even realize I had these shoes on. And then we've had other students who's like, I was actually going to quit because you told me I had to change my shoes, right?
Oh, we've had people quit.
And we've had people quit.
Oh, yeah, we've had people quit.
And we've had, for something as simple as that.
Yeah, or I didn't want to wear my sash or whatever it was. Yeah.
I didn't want to.
I'm like, that's okay. That's totally
my
your
wife
choice.
signed up my son, and now I'm here, and I noticed that he has to bow when entering the training hall.
Yeah.
We don't bow, and it's sort of like, okay, cool. Listen, goes back to your point of like, if you're not willing to follow what our philosophies, our teachings, more power to you. But you don't have to be here. It's a choice, and it's also a luxury, right? Because it's another expense on top of everything else. But I think I guess the main point I'm trying to make is if people were to be more trusting of us as far as like more charitable with, okay, the assumptions I'm making about what your intentions are, if they had a better feeling of that, then they would understand, well, the reason we have this, there are good reasons behind the reasons that we decided to do what we do. And one thing that I probably maybe once a day or throughout the week, 5 times a week, I fail at is having that same thing with other people. Because I'm very quick to go like to judge and to point. And that analogy of there's an angel on your shoulder, one shoulder, and there's a devil on the other shoulder, and you're just going to be at that moment the person that you listen. Which one are you going to listen to? I feel that I am the devil on your shoulder, because a lot of times I'm like,
on my shoulder.
I'm the devil on your shoulder. Your instinct is usually to do the right thing, and my instinct is like, no,
burn
that guy, or like forget that, let's do it, and then upon reflection, I realize that that's probably not the best thing to do. But again, this goes back also again to how you grew up. Almost always when you're talking, if we're speaking to another couple, let's say we have for dinner, you almost always say, oh man, we love that book. We enjoy this thing. We do this. And my first instinct is always saying I. And that goes to how we were raised, right? So unless I was exposed to Wah Lum Kung Fu and also exposed to, the American upbringing and exposed to my heritage, right? And then taking the time to reflect upon it, I don't think I would even notice it. Or maybe something would annoy me. But one, because I've been exposed to it, I have a very charitable assumption of your intentions, right?
Thank goodness.
It doesn't bother me. Like, I notice it and I go, oh yeah, Mimi just said, we really love that book. And I go, that's true. We really do love that book. We both love that book. But a lot of times if I were in that same conversation, I would say, man, I really love this book. And so right there, as just a couple, we have 2 different ways of communicating something. And it goes to maybe how we were raised, and maybe also to why I say that I am the devil on your shoulder, right?
Which is really funny because I feel perception is also really huge here, right? Because I am distinctly like the kids say, you're the principal at the school. And they're like, oh, I walk around and I am also very unapproachable. I'm not gonna lie, it's very intentional in terms of I also can't have a ton of inputs a million times a day because I'm already getting them a million times a day. And so I'm intentionally very distant in terms of like, hey, I'm going to be your best friend, especially at the school. I think it's a conditioning from a younger being the youngest female sifu almost always, right? Of course, now that gap's closing. I'm not the youngest anymore, and I'm not the only female sifu anymore, which is also nice. Not that I was the first or anything like that. There were female sifus older than me in our system that were my older kung fu sisters. But I feel like the fact that I've had to be conditioned to present myself in an intentional way that incurs respect and being an authority, because how I kind of look, if you just saw me in the street, does not fit the Kung Fu Master Sifu persona. Like, I don't think when you hear the word Kung Fu Master, and I've done this in workshops, I've done this in lectures, everybody is thinking of maybe my father or even like, Shaw Brothers with the long eyebrows and the beard and the Kung Fu robe. And it's almost 90+% sure it's a male. It's never a female. And this is one of the questions that Monica had asked me on the podcast the other day in her interview, and I explained the whole sifu is a male term and how I'm trying to reimagine this and let people hear the Sifu Mimi Chan show and know that word, I'm kind of claiming it as, no, this is gender neutral, and this becomes where it's not just teacher, father figure, this is teacher, mentor, teacher, person who is there for their students, right? Not man that is there for their students, which is what it just traditionally is. So I think because of my experience, like you're saying, when you grew up, you were born where you're born, who you are because of your parents, your DNA, your environment, what you ate, like what you were around, being in a high state of anxiety a lot of times, walking to school through the streets of Brooklyn in the crazy, 80s, like a time where it was very dangerous. Like all of my experiences and who I am and have had to become as a female Kung Fu Sifu is very much, a lot of that still comes through, right? Whereas I feel like I'm finally at a place in my 40s, late 40s now, that I'm not having to prove myself all the time because my work speaks for itself. My students speak for themselves. The style is like, we're so established, but that's still piggybacking off of the labor and love and hardships and work that my parents laid out, right? Specifically when it comes to Chinese Kung Fu, like my father, right? Like he is who he is. But I think there was also, because I'm his daughter, then I just automatically get all of these privileges. Not that I've had to work for them. It's just a relationship thing. And so I carry all of those things with me on a daily, right? And so there's very intentional that I have to be very careful, because if I become that friendly, chummy, I'm your friend person, immediately it opens a door for that respect in the classroom to be negated. And it won't happen with, and I'm just going to say, I've seen it. It won't happen with a male instructor. People are able to code switch and go, hey, we can talk about comics with Sifu Oscar. But when he teaches class, I'm not going to think he's my friend and I can be casual with him. I mean, some people do. I'm not saying it never happens. But I have learned through my years of experience that as a female sifu, I cannot be friendly and familiar and your best friend and your next door neighbor type that is out of the classroom, because once I get in the classroom, people do not respect me the same way. And that has been experiential and what my experience has been. I'm not saying that no one can do it, because of course there's always exceptions to the rules, but I think that people maybe don't understand that, right? And they think I'm maybe unfriendly or I am unapproachable, and of course that that behavior is also taught. I mean, my parents, neither of which are really the most approachable people. But I think that now that we discuss it and reflect on it, like all of those traits are carried over because I'm coming from that place.
Yeah, I had a 10-year career, almost 10-year career in pharmaceutical sales. Every single one of my direct managers, bosses were women. And I remember other people speaking about them in a way that was derogatory because they were women. And I never had a problem with them because I was always around a strong female person, right?
I mean, and for clarity, so listeners and audience, right? Like Oscar is, like, we had our relationship initially, like we were friends in high school, then we started dating throughout after college. Well, after college for me, halfway through college, like during our 2000s, right? So we met in 96, but we didn't officially like become a couple until like the 2000s. So we had a very established friendship. But then you decided, okay, well, we decided you're going to be in Wah Lum now. Like, hey, yeah, here you go. Like, let's go. And so I am technically his sifu, right? Generationally speaking, right? And so that is, people ask all the time, like, how do you even do that?
That's also my...
But I cut you off.
That's my personality.
Yeah.
But I guess the point I was trying to make is I've seen firsthand that women have to have this balancing act. Women who are in positions of power or authority have to have this balancing act where they know they're going to be perceived a certain way when they do something exactly how a man would do it. There's going to be a perception of, oh, she's a bitch, right?
Oh, 1,000%.
Right.
I can't even, I mean, I probably would be a billionaire if I had $1 or even a quarter maybe for every time someone has called me that in my lifetime.
Right.
Like, seriously.
But every single one I remember one of them saying to me, and it was because she got along with me so well because I had no issues with her, right? I remember her saying, you know, Oscar, like a lot of people think that I'm this person who's like a mean person or whatever. And she goes, but I have to put this persona out first so they can see that what I'm capable of. And then once they know me, I can kind of show what it is. And it goes back to what we said earlier, right? It's that term of like the charitable assumption of what their intentions are. Unfortunately, women have it tougher when they're in a position of power, right? But that's been going on for centuries probably. But if you get to really know the person, then you'll see, oh, this is where they're coming from. And I'm the first one to just be quick to judge. I'm the first one who's quick to judge when I feel that any person, if it's a student, if it's a family member, if I feel that they've misunderstood your intention. And so my fault is that I'm like, you know what, burn it. That person, let me light them up on fire, burn it, done. And I've sliced them off.
Yeah.
But that's because I look at from you from the good intention part. But on the flip side, every single person, we should probably look at them that way of like, take just a beat and go, okay, let me just see where are they coming from? What is their true intention? Most people truly aren't assholes. There are. Maybe it's 10%. I don't know. I think 10% is probably a good range of people who are genuinely.
Yeah.
But again, even though that 10%, they are that way because of all of these things that makes me who I am. All of those things makes that person who they are. We don't have time to like go deep into each person, right? Because there's only 24 hours in a day. But we can take 5 seconds and go, all right, this is just who they are. Where are they coming from? They're probably a decent person. Mm-hmm. You know, they maybe don't have the skills to have this communication. So this is a recurring theme that anytime that I have time to think about, I reflect on. But during the day, it doesn't happen. It's only after I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe there I went again and acted this way. When I know upon reflection and taking a beat that I could have done it probably better.
Yeah, and this is the conversation we're always having on empathy. And if we all had more of it, we would probably have less divisiveness and we would have less of this friction. And I think this is also going back to the student-teacher relationship. I know we've done a podcast before on sifu and what does it mean, and really taking in that term, and especially in context of the Wah Lum Temple, like there has to be a trust between the student and the teacher, mainly the student trusting the teacher. Like, why am I doing this riding horse stance and breathing for 15 minutes? Like, well, just trust your teacher. Back in the olden days, you didn't get to ask the questions. You didn't get all these podcasts to explain all the benefits of, this mobility or this exercise or this strength training or all these things. It's just almost too much information. But there has to be a trust. Like, you come to the Wah Lum Temple, you watch a class, you decide, I want to learn this. I see what everyone's doing here. I am going to trust in the process. And it is okay that trust needs to be built over time, which is why I am actually friendlier to my advanced class students. 1000%.
They've earned it.
Because they've earned it, my trust, as well as I feel like they trust me. They know me already. They know what are my intentions and where am I at, and I teach this way, and I'm going to pull the best out of you. I am going to push you to your limits. I am going to be very intentional in how I teach and hoping to make the best Wah Lum Kung Fu martial artist, right? So I think it's a very much misunderstood, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, but when you sign up, for example, at Wah Lum, don't think you realize how much trust you need to put in your coaching team. Whether that is a 14-year-old teenager, whether that is a 50-something-year-old, instructor. Sometimes I'll tell you that 14-year-old teenager actually is more advanced or knows more about teaching than our 50-somethings, right? Like sometimes they've been here doing it longer, have more experience. I definitely know there's some of our older coaches that would not do the Little Mantis, 5 to 8-year-old class as well as some of our teenagers can run it.
Yeah, I think...
So just having that trust, I think, is where people walk in and they don't realize already by signing up, they are not relinquishing, but they are agreeing to say, you know what, I do. I trust you to have to be here, to be, you are my martial arts education. I'm trusting that.
So this is where, again, I'll kind of take a little bit of accountability here, where through the influence of trying to grow a fitness business, personal training fitness business, I've influenced the temple in trying to say, hey, we need to be a little bit more welcoming and engaging. All these things are true, but it's also now we realize that we need to then always go back to, well, what is the purpose? This is now switching for Kung Fu, right? Like for Wah Lum Kung Fu and Tai Chi. Well, what is the purpose? The purpose is to teach traditional Chinese martial arts and to promote our style. That's what our purpose of doing it. And that all encompasses not just learning Kung Fu, but also learning the philosophy, the traditions, all those things. So we've come to the realization, and we're experimenting at the temple with being blessed of we have a certain amount of students. So anyone who wants to come in, as opposed to, great, come in, do you like it? Great, let's get you signed up as a student, is an application process, which is really so that we can immediately start establishing trust on both sides. The potential student comes in knowing that, yes, this is a welcoming environment taught by diverse students, by diverse instructors that are empowered by you to say, yes, you're able to teach, but that there are all of these also rules and policies that we have in place in order to foster the best possible environment to promote traditional Chinese martial arts in a classroom setting, right? Because we're not doing private lessons, right? And so that's this experiment of not just having someone come into the temple and signing them up as a student and making them think, oh, I am a client and you are the product that I'm purchasing. And because of that, I am always right.
Yeah, I think that's a Western,
it's a Western
type
thing.
Of thought process.
So if the thought can be made more of all the things we said earlier, yes, you are totally special. You're a precious little snowflake. But now you're going to come into a system and you're going to be being taught in a fun classroom environment. So then you're part of a bigger group. And so then because of that, you're not special. You're still special, but you're not special because of that. I just heard this guy Danny Meyer, who I believe he's the restaurant guy who's a restaurateur who started Shake Shack, super successful, used a term that they adopted, which is, we're gonna go with a humble swagger. And I love that because I 100% believe that Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple, Wah Lum Kung Fu system is the best possible traditional Chinese martial arts that you can get on the planet. Like, I believe that 100%. But also because we're martial artists, we're going to do it in a humble way. We're not going to be boisterous about it, right? Like, but so I
definitely wouldn't put it on like an international podcast.
But what I'm saying that, but what I'm saying is, when someone comes into the school, I really like the idea of having this instilled in myself if I'm talking to a potential student or our team, of like, approach it with just humble swagger. Like, know that you have the best possible product, but try to be there and understand, where the person is coming from. So I really, I don't know, that kind of really spoke to me. And the other thing that he said is he prioritizes the importance of things. I didn't write this down, but he's like, it's team first, customer second, investors third, or I forget, or if it's because it's a restaurant, food quality third, and then investors fourth. This is me just off the top of my head remembering. But I immediately thought, that is exactly what you've been doing at Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple, is you've put the team first, which, by the way, we have, as of this week, which is around mid-August, we have about 270 students around. What's our team of instructors total?
I believe we're at least 20 something. 20.
By the way, except for one of them.
Yeah, I don't count him.
You don't count, and you don't count either. But everyone is a volunteer.
That's right.
And everyone is a student first. A paying student.
Yes.
But you've taken, over the years, more and more time investing time on the team and making sure that they have not just the technical skills, but these like people skills that will help them, which then puts the students second. And then the style, what they're learning third, and then finally, like, investor, like, making money last. It's never our priority at the temple.
Yeah.
But because of that, I really think is why the temple is as successful as it is right now.
Yeah.
Is because you've put that team first of volunteers, 20 volunteers. Then, because you've put them first, they are able to help us, all of us together, put the students then next, and then, the curriculum, and then trying to be as successful as we can. Also, like, as a business, right? But it's still a school. And if we kind of can, maybe I can do a better job of being clearer with it, but communicate this to our team, and then to students as well, that no, actually, you're not the priority. The priority is the team that's going to teach you always, because we can't have one student be the focal point of a class of 40. We have to think of everyone else. And in order to do that, we have to empower the students. So that's a big ramble on from something that I just heard recently. But I'm going to take that idea of the humble swagger, think about it a little bit more, because I just love that.
Yeah, I think that I can see why that resonates with you in particular, as well as someone who's known you more than half your life, in terms of your humility, who you kind of are, but then when you really come into your own with things that you're expert at. And I feel like that's a really good catchphrase for you. But it's really interesting because people are often really surprised when I tell them that we have our entire coaching team, our instructors are all volunteer based, and that they're also paying students, and that they're also, and I don't mean just by the students, I mean by other Wah Lum Sifus throughout our organization. I mean through other martial arts businesses and things. And I will say that when we say volunteer, that just means, one, they're not monetarily paid, but they are definitely paid, right? So we structure it very much like an apprenticeship, right? So they are learning a trade. They are definitely receiving value for being able to help others, and kind of we're trying to empower that. And it's an interesting thing because you just said investors or finance or money or whatever is always last. And then like our lifestyle, it's very much so. Like that is the lowest priority on our list of like, that is only because we need good food, comfortable travel, so we can have our hobby, right? Oscar needs his fitness equipment, but good weapons, you know, for swords. But like, so that's always the lowest priority. And clearly our team feels the same. Like they don't want monetary, you know, compensation. They enjoy, I believe, the process of learning and that enrichment and understanding more about the system and the time that we spend and invest in them, right? Like, so the investment doesn't become monetary. It becomes personal. It becomes Sifus student. It becomes building more of that trust, giving them more knowledge, right? And I think that is so like parallel alignment with how do we want the school to run? Same way we have our instructors and we want them to feel the same way, where like we are attracting the exact human that is going to proliferate this art, that is going to be able to give that messaging forward, that those are the type of people who have empathy and who have the characteristics that we want to build upon our future leaders, our future Sifus, our future instructors. And it's super exciting actually for us to see. So while in some ways, not that we started off negatively, but we started off with a little bit of a rant of, wow, like so many people don't get us. It's pretty amazing to see what a high percentage of the people that do get us and how much trust they have in us to help us like with this mission of Wah Lum.
Yeah, and you know, there's another thing that this person mentioned about percentage of what of the skills that he wants his employees to have. And so we all know IQ, right? Your intelligence quotient. We've all heard of the empathy
Like
one,
emotional
IQ. And he says, I don't understand why we can't have or don't have yet a hospitality, a HQ type thing. You know, because he's looking at it as a restaurateur. And we can take that as like the secondary skills that our assistant instructors are learning. So he says the percentage I always want to have is 49% technical skill, 51% HQ, or we could call it empathy, or you know, the people skills. And again, I think that is the reason why the assistant instructors that are there at the temple are all on a volunteer basis. It's not just they're learning a trade like an apprenticeship of a technical skill, but I still think that's 49-51. I think the 51%, which really makes you feel like you're having an impact, is all the skills that they're getting of learning how to help make other people better people.
Yes. I mean, and that is, you know, you started off with like, okay, the mission of the Kung Fu Temple is, you know, teach traditional Chinese Kung Fu and proliferate that art. That's 100%.
But what does that mean?
But what does that mean? And I don't think people realize that is not, oh, I can do this really cool sword and spear form. I mean, obviously that's dope, right? To be able to do a cool weapon. But our philosophy and our mission within what does it mean to teach traditional Wah Lum martial arts is kindness, fellowship, hard work, respect, patience, empathy, right? And those are the things. That's the 51%. So that is really kind of to bring us into a circle. Incredible that we're, you know, kind of, you know, I don't know if listeners are going to know this, but we didn't actually plan this conversation.
No, but
we talk so much, right?
We talk so much about this, and
but it's a really great brainstorming. Like, wow, this really does kind of all fit together in the way of which all the philosophies we're talking about. Like, it's in such alignment.
Yeah, going back to like my first pharmaceutical job was with Eli Lilly, and I was in Indianapolis doing training. There's a lot of things that I don't remember from that training, but one thing that is super clear is it was a classroom environment, and there was two teachers who were teaching us all about the drugs that we were going to be selling, but also the science behind it. But there was one practice that we did, which they started with the end in mind, which is the end is, and the world will be a better place. So it was a selling type of skill, but it was like, doctor, the reason why you want to prescribe this pill is because then it'll make the patient better, but then this, then this, then this, then this, and then eventually why? Because it'll make the world a better place. And that just is a memory that just came to mind while we were talking about this of like
1% better.
Well, not just the 1% better, but the end in mind is we want to make the world a better place. Our
Through
vehicle,
better humans.
through better humans. So we're going backwards now. Through better
Yeah.
humans, through teaching traditional kung fu. But really, the end in mind is like, everyone wants to like live in a happy world and be. But it starts with like, how can we change people to become the best versions of themselves? And our vehicle for doing that is Kung Fu and Tai Chi. And, but that's kind of like you said, not the most important thing. The most important thing is that end point. And so we've had students who've left after just being with us for a year or so.
Yeah.
And have had that impact.
Because they don't want the world to be a better place. That's why they leave. No, I'm
no,
just kidding.
Some it's just not the right fit.
No, I'm teasing.
But have come back. And we've
Yeah.
been shocked and we're like, wow, this person. So in any case, I guess that's, we started off with negativity and circled around to positivity, back to a little bit of negativity, all the way back to positive. We did more than a full circle.
Okay, All right, I think we'll leave it there today. And I would love to hear from listeners, viewers, what their thoughts are, or if they're in a organization or a team or something that kind of gives you this sense of all of the things that we're talking about in the philosophies and how that maybe relates to your art form or your sport or your place of practice. And because I really do feel, and I know that I'm biased, but Wah Lum is a really special place because we are all special. And nobody's special. But I do feel like it is super unique in an effect of we do have a full volunteer team. We have people who are passionate that want to be there. And that energy comes through. And the reason that we are there is definitely to make better humans, not just of others, but also of ourselves.
Yeah,
mainly the betterment of ourselves. And by doing that, all the other things hopefully happen too.
So just Wah Lum students, just wear your uniform and apply by the policies.
Jinzhou, Jinxi, Jingaodou, which is part of our philosophy. If you know, you know. And that's part of it. That Jinzhou, Jinxi, Jingaodou, right? Like that's, people just repeat things that they say all the time is respect your teachings, respect your sifus. This is what's being told by your sifus. And so sometimes you just have to understand to trust your sifus, I think, is the bottom line there too.
Love it.
Love it. I thought you were going to like clap. All right. That's a wrap. We'll see you all next time. Thank you for another MiOsc episode. Bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.